Hi everybody, a big welcome from the KSA and a special warm welcome to those students who have joined us who are taking part in the KSA 2021 Kitchen Design Project. Today we've asked Dan Forsyth from CP&B to join us and to just take us through some important things we need to know when it comes to kitchen plumbing. Dan, welcome, thank you very much, and over to you.
Thanks, Steph. How's it, students? All welcome to this initiative. Steph approached me and kind of like plucking my brain on what I didn't know I actually do know. So going forward on your kitchen design, I think start at the beginning. You need to get your design together, what you like and what your customer might enjoy. And then you need to take that into, once agreed upon, you need to take it into more of a practical approach and apply some behind the wall thought process to what you're actually trying to achieve and the ramifications of that. So where I come in on the plumbing side, I think it's quite important that you plan where your pipework's going to go and you actually document it, because later down the line, should there be an alteration of sorts or something, at least then the customer knows where to move things and where they can drill, to mount your carcasses and towel hangers or whatever it may be. So in doing that, in that plan, you've got to also try and keep a regular thought process, almost a predictive thought process. So you keep all your pipes vertical or you keep them horizontal. I suggest vertical, and you keep them all either centered to your point of use coming down from the ceiling. Not very practical in terms of a kitchen, because generally you've got a sink under a window, or should I say a window behind a sink. So come down on the left and across to the right to your point of use, being your tap or your dishwasher or wash machine, whatever it may be. But keep it regular. That's probably one of the more important points. Another point on that is try and not share your chasing for the pipes, your hot and your cold. Try not put them together, because what ends up happening is that your hot water ends up influencing the temperature of your cold water in the chase, and therefore it's you end up getting lukewarm water from your cold water, which ultimately inevitably ends up as being a wasted water until you get the cold. What else? The other thing is that you'd like to think about what the customer possibly can't right now afford, but in long term might want to achieve, and that being the addition of a ice maker or a fridge with an ice maker and a water point. Try and get all that plumbing installed before, as opposed to 6 years down the line when they say no, then they'll only be able to afford it. Rather get it done now, and that way it's done for the future. It will save them a lot of pain, possibly make a little bit more money for you guys in your in a little bit more work and design, but I think you need to remain customer centric here to make sure that your customer is happy first and foremost. What else on that? You've got different pipe installation principles, or actually different principles of pipe. You've got multi-layered piping, which is all the trend now because it's a cheaper installation. It's perceived as a longer term product in terms of it's got a longer lifespan. The problem with the multi-layer piping scenario is that it does restrict the performance at your point of use in terms of a restricted flow. So therefore, the water coming out of your tap is going to be, slower than standard. You might want to view that as a water saving feature. In actual fact, it's not a water saving feature. It is actually it just takes you longer to fill your pot. You're going to fill the pot to that volume, or you're going to fill the sink to that volume in any case, no matter how long it takes. So my suggestion is to stick with copper, as it's got a full bore flow rate right up to the the point of use, or the angle valves regulating that point of use. And that way you get maximum potential out of your plumbing reticulation. So I am all for copper on an installation. I think from a plumbing advice, I think that's pretty much it. Maybe at every point of use, you might want to have an isolating valve before it reaches your point of use, i.e. your tap or your wash machine or your dishwasher, and so be it. Yeah, moving on to what your selection of, let's say, on your finishes now, where you choose your mixes. All through life, I've always gone for the best I can possibly afford, plus maybe 10 or 15%. So I've stretched a little bit beyond my budget in every aspect of my life. And it pays dividend in the long run. It might be a little bit of a painful thing to experience right there and then, but in the long run, you're not going to have burst pipes. You're not going to have a lack of after-sales service when your maintenance is due. You're going to have a well-working product for a way longer time, and something that's not going to age prematurely as well, in terms of the chrome peeling off or the cartridge prematurely failing. With that, the other regulating valve is also for your wash machine. Everybody isolates their wash machines, but most people, unfortunately, bring in a tight budget here for that tap. But it becomes totally impractical, because what they do is they take an angle valve, which is a little 90-degree turning valve, which isolates your wash machine or your dishwasher. But they take that, because it's maybe $100, and they stick it in underneath the counter, right at the back behind the wash machine or dishwasher. So when you go away for an extended period of time, fortunately, you might be able to do that in the near future, you've got to bend down and you've got to turn the tap off there to isolate that unit, the wash machine or dishwasher or fridge. As opposed to putting a concealed under-tile stop tap above the counter. Please bear in mind the aged people here as well, who are not so agile, and maybe don't have long enough arms to reach at the back, whatever the scenario may be. But from a practicality point of view, put an under-tile stop tap above the counter. Sometimes doesn't suit the design, but there are various design under-tile stop taps that actually look aesthetically pleasing, so that they could suit the part. What else? You also waste disposal units. That's another interesting discussion. Some people are for them, mainly Europeans and Australians, and Americans, but somehow South Africa, because I think we've got a large portion of pets in our community, a lot of people tend to give their dogs the bone and so on and so forth. I don't like waste disposal units in that they are high maintenance in terms of keeping clean. But once you're used to keeping something like that clean, it just becomes your everyday mundanity. The other thing is the hygiene factor with those units. I feel that if you somehow do not clean them and forget it for a day or two, you end up with these stenches. And obviously with stenches, that means that there's decay and rotting material inside there. Not the greatest picture, but yeah, I don't really like them and I don't advocate them, but each one to their own. What else? Sinks and prep bowls, the actual stainless steel or the various different materials you can choose from. There are so many options, it's ridiculous. And there are so many different brands as well, bringing in really good quality products. But also across all those options, you get different material options as well as design. The most prevalent, obviously, as we all know, is stainless steel. Stainless steel on the cheaper end of things, that ends up scratching quite a lot because they use a softer stainless steel. and it looks very old within about 2 to 3 years, depending on how you manage and maintain your sink or prep bowl. You get a higher grade stainless steel with a higher carbon content, and that they generally don't, how can I say, they don't press the bowl out of a flat sheet of stainless steel, they actually weld it. And as close as you'll look at this weld, you'll swear that it's not a weld because it looks seamless and it's clean. The problem with this is then a lot of people think, oh, I want square in the house, which is the biggest fashion. And so they go for the square sink. When it's square, think about the practicalities. It looks beautiful and your friends might, oh, beautiful sink. But when it comes to actually keeping it clean, you've got these little nooks all around your sink, all in the bowl. And those things, I can guarantee you, unless you've got a toothbrush, you're not going to keep them clean regularly. And a lot of that bacteria, I mean, you're not going to see it by the eye, but eventually you will, but initially you won't. So you kind of want to go for a rounded square, like a soft cube, for want of a picture in your head. That soft cube allows you to obviously clean in the corners. It looks good. It looks modern, as well as it's a higher grade stainless steel. And inevitably what they'll do is they'll also put a sound deadening plate underneath the bowl, which is it's more of a bituminous tape, which they put there. And that obviously eliminates the clanking and the reverberation of dishes in the sink. The other medium which is very popular is the sill granite, how can I say, the stone sinks. I don't know, there's so many different terms for the same product. But here it's a molded product. So there's endless designs. The practicality of having that nature of product is it's naturally sound deadening. It's naturally scratch proof and stain proof if you go for a higher quality product. There are one or two out there that are, let's call it substandard, which will stain to red wine or coffee or whatever else can stain. As you can see, I don't really dye my hair in there, but hair dyes, yeah, they would also stain. Yeah, and you get them in various different colors, as well as finishes. Some look like oatmeal, some look like rock granite, some look like charcoal, some look like snow. There's all various options there, which are worth looking at. I personally have them in my house, and they've proven very well. Another one which is fairly popular and more in the period piece houses, you know, the Victorian kind of houses or country houses, is the ceramic or fire clay sinks. They look beautiful, they're nice and hygienic. My problem there is that when you bring glass or other ceramic in contact with that surface, there's a kinetic energy that the chances are you are going to chip whatever item it is that you're introducing into that sink, unless it's a plastic or something. So from a looks-wise, looks lovely. Practicality-wise, I don't believe it's the best decision you're going to make. But once again, I mean, if you buy a Ferrari, you're not going to drive it at 300 k's an hour through the streets. You're going to crash. So if you're going to have a ceramic sink, just be careful, look after it for what it is, and appreciate it for what it is. In terms of location, maybe within the kitchen area, it's nice to have a prep bowl that is central to all your work points. These kind of take a focal point in your kitchen, maybe by default or by design. But from a practicality point of view, it really does make sense to have a prep bowl in the middle of your work points for all the obvious reasons. And what that also inevitably does, it places the focus on the prep bowl and the mixer in the prep bowl. So in terms of budget, there should always be a greater percentage afforded to this point. So you step the game up there like you would do in your main ensuite bathroom or your guest cloakroom. You step the budget up and put something really nice and aesthetically pleasing as well. A lot of people use retractable sink mixers at this point, and they also use the instant boiling water taps as well. I can't mention brands, but ultimately a water tap that delivers instantly hot boiling water. Yeah, boiling water is hot, believe it or not. And chilled water as well, depending on where the budget goes, but you do get items that do both boiling and chilled water, as well as filtered water. It is an exceptionally practical feature to have in your kitchen, and convenient, should I use that word as well. Generally, those taps are not the prettiest. They're quite bulky, and I'm sure you can understand why. But I think their function outdoes their aesthetic. What else would I need to say on sink and prep bowls? I think move on to the next one would be with appliances. That's another thing, the dishwashers and the wash machines. I think I touched on it earlier. Make sure that you plan in advance and you have your points set out right in the beginning and they're done. Another, I'm going to say a South African trend, is just to extend your waste pipe, the bilge pipe from your dishwasher, the 40 mil or 50 mil, which it's going into, depending on where you live. There's a habit, and it's an ugly habit, of just protruding this pipe out of the wall at a 45-degree angle, which then ultimately absorbs the space for the wash machine or dishwasher, the cavity in which it rolls back into. It takes up space there. It looks ugly. And quite frankly, I take it as a lack of self-respect as a plumber. You know, when I was plumbing years ago, it would be a case of we'd have a wash machine box or dishwasher box where it's a recess inside the wall behind the appliance. And therefore, your pipe runs into the wall as opposed to into a pipe exposed on the wall. As well as your water supply, it also gets held inside this wash machine box. It's a trend which has fallen away, and it is unfortunate, but I'm sure that you designers should insist on it and try and reinstate that, because that's always an ugly place in the kitchen, is behind any appliance. And also odors tend to arise from these points. When there's a bit of wind blowing, as we have down here in the Cape, one tends to get these odors blowing back up from the gully area straight into the kitchen space, and that's obviously a non-desirable. On appliances, also some fridges, they have a single filter that they come with, you know, the filter for what they call filtrated water or ice making. It's really just an activated carbon filter. I think it depends on what level of fridge you're buying. You know, if you're buying the top end, maybe it's a different story. But for us mere mortals, we have a single activated cartridge, which isn't actually enough, because all that does is actually just remove a little bit of the chlorine flavor out of the water. If you were to install a 3-stage filter unit prior to your fridge, your quality of ice would be far greater and your drinking pleasure would be far greater. Or reverse osmosis unit, whatever you might choose to go for. But either which way, you want to keep your control points as how can I say, available as possible, but also bearing in mind, should they be available and what's it, design oriented, what's it, they're more aesthetically pleasing. You need to make sure that they are aesthetically pleasing if they are visual to the eye. I think from appliances, that would probably around about do that. The space under the sink is a space which people think they can hide away shortcuts and lack of planning. When you open a cupboard under a sink, it's like opening Pandora's box. You never quite know what you're going to get. But that space is largely determined, the usage of that space is very heavily determined by the plumbing layout in that space. A lot of people, let me call it, a lot of plumbers just run their trap system directly underneath the waist of the sink and then run it back to the wall. Inevitably, that point where it comes out the wall is sitting at a diagonal off the center of the sink or the center of the waist. And therefore, you've got all this pipe work, like spaghetti work underneath the sink. Therein, you're unable to use that space efficiently. You have to cut your cupboard in the cupboard shelf in a very horrible manner with a jigsaw, if you're lucky. Otherwise, a hammer and screwdriver, I've seen it being done before. But if you plan your space underneath and you locate your waste pipe in a thought-out space, in a thought-out height, which can be given to you by your professional at your plumbing retailer or your showroom who sells the sinks, you're going to end up saving space. You're going to make the place look a lot neater. And as strange as it may sound, you will not be hiding that space from your guests when you're asking them to wash the dishes. That to me is smart pipe work. What else would be next? I think I've covered most bases, but I think something I haven't covered is the fact that you should always, always, always use a professional to do this job. Not only does a professional, he charges, and it's well worth it because quality is remembered long after the price is forgotten, but he'll be there in 5 years' time or 10 years' time because he has made a profit on the work he does, and therefore it's a sustainable business that you're dealing with, as opposed to somebody who'll come in and undercut a perceived high cost, but actually undercut it and generally get the job. But then in a year's time, he's gone, your customers' cupboards are all swollen, and you're sitting there with a mouthful of teeth. Make sure, please, support the professionals. They've studied, they've paid to do this job, as have you guys. Do not go cheapest, ever. That's what I have to say for that.
Thanks, Dan. That was fantastic. I know Kieran's been sitting making some notes, as have I, while you were talking, and has a few. We have a couple of questions for you. So, Kiz, do you want to go first?
Yes, please. So, one of the things that we see in design quite often, especially on Pinterest, because customers love Pinterest, is those little clever foldable taps that are always fitted by the stove to fill up your pasta pots and that kind of thing. Have those made their way across to the South African market as yet?
Mostly it's an American standard that there. Yeah, you do get them. Am I allowed to mention brands, or what's the story here?
I'm sure you can.
Take two. Yes, there are people who have asked for them, and you're 100% correct based on Pinterest. Pinterest, I can tell you right now, is my best friend, but my absolute worst enemy. I mean, the stuff which people come to and they say, oh, why can't you get it? Well, they don't quite understand that it's a completely different spec. You know, where they're using imperial threads as opposed to metric threads, and the diameters are different, and the content of the brass is not suitable to our water conditions. To answer you in short, you can get them, but they are like hen's teeth.
Okay, and then another one which you were chatting about earlier was the ceramic sinks, or also known as butler basins. So I agree with you. When we did kitchen designs, I would also advise against using it as your main cleanup sink in your kitchen. But one thing, would you perhaps advise that they could have it as a prep bowl in the main kitchen area, and then possibly use a stainless steel sink in the scullery if they have that space?
Okay, so I go back on to depending on how you're going to use it. If you're going to use it with discipline and you're going to use it to prepare your vegetables, prepare your, I don't know if you're really preparing meat, but ultimately preparing your vegetables and whatever else it may be, absolutely go for it. It's a beautiful piece of design inside a kitchen, but I do not advocate using it as your primary sink at all. Yeah, that's really what I have to say there.
Okay, and then last one, and this is just also because we've had some experience or some queries from consumers with it, is I know from my grandparents and my mom's days, I'm giving away their ages, but in their days, it was, even now still, taboo defrosting meat in the microwave. So they would always take it out in the morning or the night before and then stick it on the draining board in the kitchen. And that's just how we used to defrost our meat. I think they still do it. But I wanted to ask you, is there any kind of negative effect on the stainless steel? Have you had any comebacks with there being an effect to the material from that?
Are you saying like blood stains or some along those lines?
No, more along the lines of rusting.
Okay, sorry, that's something, now you say that rusting, something, I'm going to step a little bit aside from that question right now, but okay. Ultimately, something which I should have mentioned is stainless steel, depending on the quality you buy, everybody, and I'm prepared to say 98% of people keep all their chemicals underneath their sink. That is not what you should be doing. Anything that is a chlorine base or a salt base, do not keep it underneath your sink. And especially in the welded sinks. The welded sinks have obviously exposed steel where it's been worked and gone through heat processes, and therefore becomes a little bit more susceptible to rust creeping into the cavities underneath. I have not seen any sink of quality rusting under the conditions you have mentioned, Karen. But I have seen cheaper sinks rusting actually within a year along the coastal belt of South Africa, more prevalent up in the KZN area, but it also happens down here in the Western Cape as well. So all along the coastline, absolutely, yeah. From a food perspective, I've not seen any sink or had any call out in, I think I'm 28 years in the industry now, that food has caused that, no.
Okay, thanks very much.
Sure.
Yeah, now it's my turn. I've got it covered. Dan, we spoke earlier about having the plan, or we called it the water plan on the slide. And just from a responsibility side, whose responsibility would it be to draw up that water plan? Would the designer have to do it, the kitchen designer, or would the plumber or the primary contractor do that?
Steph, in my opinion, whoever takes responsibility for the kitchen, a plumber is not a designer. A plumber is a tradesman. He is there to install what he is told to install in the fashion in which he is taught. So the plumber can advise. My suggestion is that the designer should actually do it because they are the professional in terms of the design. It's an interesting question you ask, but perhaps even a collab between all of them, they can even do a pencil sketch. It doesn't have to be this high design scenario, depending on the level of it where you're operating. But a good pencil sketch with measurements, and that goes into the household file. It doesn't have to be a formal thing.
Can just shows from a designer's perspective how important it is to work with other trades and have respect for them and collaborate. Absolutely. Rather than just assuming you know everything and being arrogant about it. To understand and work with the professionals in their trade to make sure that you've got your plan right.
Correct. Yeah. And unfortunately, I've seen it a lot of times on site where the said professional is almost mightier than God, should I say. You know, totally unapproachable by, let's call it the tradesman, or there's like ego. It's ridiculous. You know, here you are, Mr. Bricklayer, telling me what to do, and I've studied 7 years at varsity. Who are you to tell me? But Mr. 7 years at varsity, have you actually laid a brick around a pipe scenario? You know, just talk to each other and actually better the whole process for everybody, or even just for yourselves. You're learning something by listening to the person on the ground, and vice versa.
Agreed. Then just my last question is, we see a lot of issues with the installation of sinks, particularly when they're being installed into stone, so whether it's granite or engineered stone, etc. We mentioned it briefly on one of the slides, some of the problems that can be experienced with underslung sinks. But just if you can highlight for us, what are some of the key issues that arise with incorrect installation of sinks?
Well, I mean, I think obviously you've got to have your professional attach the underslung. If we're talking underslung specific, you've got to have you got to use your you feel is better. I don't think there is any better. It's really what you're used to. One of the bigger issues is also creating a cave at the little recess where your sink meets the underpart of your surface, your granite or your stone or whatever you're using. That cave there is also hardly ever gets cleaned. It's a little dark area, and that's where all the bacteria is going to gather, and obviously therefore a health risk. I've also, from an attachment point of view, sorry, I'm all over the show on this. From an attachment point of view, I've seen sinks which are, I think I've seen it twice, sinks which are 1 meter wide, underslung sinks with a full volume of water, if you can imagine how heavy that must be. And that therein is the reason why they don't manufacture massive big bowl underslung bowls, because of primarily that reason, unless it's got a structural support underneath the bowl, i.e. the carcass, and it's been attached properly. I think you're looking for problems here. Obviously, if there's a leak between the surfaces, it's going to obviously leak down into your carcass, and your carcass is going to rot. And I'll guarantee it once again, it's going to be 9 times out of 10, you're going to pick this up far too late, unless you're an observant homeowner, and you're going to have to replace that carcass sooner than later.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Again, I think that's another reference when we look back at how to collaborate with other professionals, that with an underslung, it's important for good communication between the plumber and then the guys doing the granite as well as the designer.
Yeah, and what ends up happening is the guy doing the granite insists on having the actual item on site before he does any cutout and polishing. And I agree with him. You can't go with just the pattern, which possibly comes in the box. Take the actual item, not somebody else's item that is actually the same. Take that item which that customer has bought, take it to the granite guy and let him do the cutout for that specific one.
I agree 100%. Then you have no oopses with incorrect cutout sizes.
We've felt a lot of pain there.
Dan, I think that's all the questions that I had. I'd like to big thanks to CP&B for letting us steal you out of the office hours away from work. I appreciate it. And thanks, Emil, for just giving the students some insight as to what to expect from a plumbing perspective in the kitchen. Really appreciate it.
Absolute pleasure. They're welcome to contact me if there are any other questions they need asking, or via you, whatever it may be, but I'm always happy to assist.
Fantastic. Thanks so much.
Good, Karen. Okay.